It is NFL Draft Week, and we are here to break down the best fits by day and round for the Indianapolis Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Is up, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and making us your first or potentially your last listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your favorite co-host here on the Locked On Colts podcast, and also your favorite film nerd over at the horseshoehuddle.com. I am joined by my buddy Destin Adams at the Destin Adams on Twitter, over there at A to Z Sports, covering the Colts, the draft, and 400 million other things over there at A to Z Sports is what Destin's doing. And I brought Destin on today, one, because Jake couldn't join us today. He's got a lot of stuff going on, but I grabbed Destin, obviously, to fill in for that. But also, we have had a lot of conversations on the show throughout draft season about, perfect guys we want in round 1 and day 2 and day 3. And it's been in all these segmented little pieces and all over the place for us. And, we like to operate that way, but I wanted to put it all together in a nice little package for you guys. So on today's episode, we're going to go by round 1, then obviously to day 2 and day 3. We're going to talk about the best fits for the Colts, guys we like and guys to watch come draft time later this week. So Destin, let's kick it off here with round 1 here in our first segment. And, to me, there was obviously a handful of guys we're watching, a handful of guys who not only make sense for the Colts, but fit the type of player that they go for, the type of player they need on this team. But the two guys I'm thinking of, and they kind of are on opposite ends of the spectrum. One is tight end Brock Bowers from Georgia, where he just fits everything they need on offense right now and fits that playmaker they're looking for. And the other one is Dallas Turner, that fits the type of player they almost always go for. And Chris Ballard, he loves to invest in the trenches early in the draft. So those are the two guys where it's like, I don't know if they're going to be there at 15, but those are the names I keep coming back to, like Dallas Turner, Brock Bowers. I think they want one of those guys to fall to 15 so bad.
Yeah, I mean, in the first episode of, I guess they're not calling it with the next pick this year. So I don't even remember what they call it now, but in my head, it's still with the next pick. The Colts released the first episode of that video series today when we're recording this. And there's a segment in there where they were just talking about they could potentially be there at 15. That's the quote that kind of stands out for a lot of people. And those are the two names that came to my mind immediately. Yeah. I think Brock Bowers, I think Dallas Turner are two guys that just, like you said, I think they'd fit what the Colts an essential, maybe not need, but they would just fit the team so well that it would just make so much sense. I mean, Bowers in this RPO styled offense could basically just pick up where he left off at Georgia. And then you have a guy like Anthony Richardson, a little bit stronger of an arm than he's been able to work with at Georgia, obviously. And you get to come in here and have that little bit upgrade. And then Dallas Turner, you watch him at the combine on the Colts field, and that's an edge rusher that was just built in a lab by Chris Ballard. I think there's a few other players to look at round 1. I think a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. At receiver would really fit them really well. Is that at 15? Is that a trade down? I don't know. I had him picking him at 20 in my most recent mock draft, my last mock draft. Thank you, Lord, for the last mock draft of the year. But I had Brian Thomas Jr. to the Colts at 20 in that mock draft. Is it a guy like Xavier Worthy, who they've done a ton of work on this offseason in a potential trade back? Or maybe they go corner, the most exciting position on the board here to excite all these fans, and go Quinyon Mitchell, go with Terrion Arnold, go with Cooper DeJean, just so they can get some people upset in the chats. But there are a lot of good options for the Colts at 15.
Yeah, I think they're going to be sitting there at 15, like Chris Ballard always does. I'm not ruling out a trade up. We could see a trade up. it would be so uncharacteristic for Chris Ballard that I'm not going to just bank on it. He's the type of guy where he's going to sit there, he's going to let the board come to him and make that decision when the board comes his way. And I know our YouTube comments have not been the fondest of that idea, but look, I'm just saying how he's typically operated. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that is how he's typically operated. But he's probably hoping, guys like Roma Dunze maybe slip a little bit too. I think that's another player they're going to be really high on. But ultimately, I think when it comes down to being on the clock at 15, obviously if Turner or Bowers are there, run it in, get those guys here. But it becomes interesting if those two guys are gone, because I do think those two guys, they would take over a trade up or a trade back option. I don't like, unless the trade back option was just so good, like you're getting a future first round pick, I think they would take those guys over a trade back. But then the question comes in, like, if those two guys are gone and Odunze is gone and like other top names, do you take a Quinyon Mitchell, who they might have as cornerback one in this class because he fits so much of what they like? He's a little bit smaller, a little bit shorter arms, but plus athlete, hyper competitive, physical player, a lot of zone work in college as well, was great at the Senior Bowl, like Rocky Sin was back in the day. So that it reminds me a lot of that situation. Do they take a Quinyon Mitchell, or do they look to trade back and get like a Cooper DeJean, at like 20 or 21 instead? Do they kind of have to evaluate how they see DeJean versus Quinyon, and DeJean plus extra picks versus Quinyon? So I think that becomes really interesting. And that's an interesting aspect to this, is if those top two guys, we're presuming top two guys, if Dallas Turner and Brock Powers are gone, do they value a trade back and assets plus another one of these players they kind of like over maybe a Quinyon Mitchell or Brian Thomas Jr., who you might have to take at 15, and they might like them a little bit more than those guys, but is it worth more than, the stuff you could get back in a trade back?
Yeah, I mean, when you say he's not operated that way for a trade up, I mean, he literally has never traded up in round one. Like, has never done it as the GM of the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, they've had some small trade ups in other rounds. Honestly, probably the most aggressive trade up that we've seen him do, like on draft day, is arguably the Nick Cross trade up, where he sends a future third to go do it. So like they've shown some ability to trade up. They did it for Jonathan Taylor, of course, as well, but never done it in round one. So that's what makes it hard. And you're probably looking at a range of like 8 to 12 area is probably more realistically than all these people that haven't traded.
I would think probably 12 is where it starts, and maybe 13, knowing Chris Ballard. Like, I don't see him going all the way up to 8. That just seems like such a hefty price for him to pay, and he hates giving up those top assets there.
Yeah. I think the 8 to 12 is like where the calculators, I mean, obviously those are just stuff for us. And they have their own calculators that they do trade pick evaluation wise. That 8 range is roughly where you're not going to have to send your 2024 second. You may send a future second. You may send a third this year, but like you most likely will not have to give up the second this year in that range. So that's what I've watched if they decide to do it. But like you said, very unlikely. Trading back, I mean, they love to do that. Like that, they love to do that, especially in round one. We've seen it multiple times during his tenure. And I think there's a lot of solid day 2 talent to warrant it. They only have 7 picks this year. I can't imagine they want to end with 7 picks. They probably want to be in the 8 to 9 range at the end of all of this. So whether it's in round one or if it's later on, there's going to be a few trade backs to get some more assets.
Yeah, no, Chris Ballard has made, I think, 36 draft selections since the 2020 draft. So average of around 9 a season. I think his lowest with the Colts was 7. I want to say it was 7 back in 2021. I want to say it was 7 back then, but for the most part, he's 9 plus every single year. So he wants to stock up on draft picks. He wants to take more shots at. He said in his pre-draft press conference, hey, history tells us that the more shots you have at finding talent, the better off you're going to be. It's a very analytical approach to the draft. So again, smart money for me is in a trade back rather than a trade up. He could make that move for a Turner or a Bowers or an Odunze if he sees the opportunity. But for the most part, I think they're going to stay put at 15. I think those are the names to consider. Did you have any other names to throw in there, like maybe a Jared Verse in a trade back or something? But,
No, I mean, no, not that I can think of. I mean, I honestly, the more I've thought about it, like I think Leatu Latu is probably their edge too. in this class, just because of upside. And I think if they're going to take a swing at edge rusher, it's going to be upside. But so maybe you can put Latu as a trade back option. I'd be pretty shocked if I heard them send the pick in at 15 and it's Latu, but he also may not be there at 15. So it just takes a team.
Yeah. And another name to maybe throw in there if they really want to just make everyone upset is like a Graham Barton from Duke. I don't think they go offensive line that early whatsoever, but he's the guy that you would take early if you do take. But
stud of a player. If they take a guard / center at 15, they may have some angry people at West 56 within like a minute, but we'll see what happens.
Right. But I think that's all we got for the primer on round one. I think you guys are ready for round one. But after a quick break here, we're going to dive into the day 2 picks. Though that's where it gets interesting because Chris Ballard historically either drafts great players, all pro players, or guys who are out of the league within a couple years. So it's going to be really fun to see day 2 coming up here in just a second. But first, it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. And guys, don't be a fan like me when it comes to the playoffs. I'm a fan of the Pacers and the Capitals, so I got to see a couple blowouts not go my way in the first couple days of the playoffs. So if you're smart, bet against your favorite team. That's what I'm going to be doing going forward. That way I can at least make some money if I'm upset. So what are you guys waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And also, guys, we've all been there either as a player or as a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. Again, I know a lot of you guys watching these playoffs games recently, the halftime score was not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heist, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. It's the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go. Lets you compete with all your friends to get the most riches in the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly that you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's just so much to do. My wife is kicking my butt every single day on this game, and you guys will have a lot of fun getting beat by your wives as well. So play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rents for your iconic property. You could even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. All right, Destin, so I'm going to kick it to you here. When we're looking at day 2 options for the Colts, this can be at 46, 82. It can be if they, somehow scoop up more day 2 picks like Ballard probably wants to do. Who are some names that you have circled in red or whatever color you use to circle names on your draft board using the Indy Draft Guide? What are you circling on your guide there for day 2 for the Colts?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the best argument to go corner in round 1 has been because of the fits at receiver on day 2. Like I think that is probably the best argument you can make for corner on day 1. I really like the fit of a Troy Franklin that'd be in the second round, and Xavier Legette, who may be a trade up in the second round. I don't know if he gets to you at 46, to be honest, but he's a guy that I think would fit really well. Looking to the third round at receiver, I'm only talking the player that this guy is. I know there's some off the field stuff, not condoning any of that, but Jermaine Burton is a guy that's really talented, would really fit well in the role that the Colts have open on the offense. That'd probably be in the third round, maybe the fourth, depending on how far the character concerns push him down. At receiver, though, like I don't know if you have any other names that come to your mind on day 2, but like those are the 3 that I've really come back to over and over again. Is if we're going to draft a guy on day 2, that's who I like. I'm not a Ricky Pearsall guy to Indy. I love Ricky Pearsall, the player. I just don't like the fit in Indy.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you mentioned Pearsall in there too, because that was the other name I had on here. And I'm like you, I don't love the fit in Indy, but I think the Colts are going to be a big fan of him because of that catch radius, because of the athletic upside, because of that relationship with Anthony Richardson. So that's another name I do have circled here for the Colts. Now, it is interesting, though, you did mention cornerback as like a round one option because of the wide receiver talent on day two. There is one corner that really stands out to me on day two, though, and that is Rutgers cornerback Max Melton. It's a guy we've talked about a lot this pre-draft cycle. Super long arms, great athlete, really good ball skills in college. I think he had 8 picks at the college game, a lot of pass breakups, can play slot, can play outside, had a really good Senior Bowl week. I mean, this feels like a guy where it's like, look, if you want to go get your playmaker early, you want to go get your Brian Thomas Jr., go get your Brock Bowers, you can sit there at 46 and potentially get Max Melton, who brings that athletic upside that you don't have in your cornerback room right now, who can also play in your scheme really well. He's a little bit stiffer of a corner, not super stiff, but a little bit stiffer, really, really good in zone overall, which is what the Colts do like all the time on their defense. So when I'm looking at corners that fit on day two, it's red pen, it's Sharpie, it's everything possible around Max Melton, because I don't know if I have another day two corner in this draft here that fits what the Colts typically look for at the position. So Max Melton not only fits what the Colts look for, he fits what I look for in a corner. It's like it's everything that I want there for the Colts on day two. He might be the only option there in day two for the Colts if they don't go corner in day one. But I really, really like Max Melton. I would definitely feel comfortable taking him with the top 50 pick.
Yeah, so Max Melton, the top of the Bill to Hicks corner, for round 2. But that's the thing with these day 2 corners. A lot of them are slot guys, and that gets a little tricky. Like I took Mike Sandristil. I'm really bad with last names, but like out of Michigan, stud of a player. I took him in a mock draft to the Colts I did recently just because of how the board fell in a live mock draft, and I got roasted for it because he's a slot guy. But that's a lot of these guys on day 2. There are going to be teams that don't even let Max Melton play on the outside. There are going to be teams that pencil him in as only a nickel. The Colts probably aren't going to be one of them. They've let some smaller guys, as long as they have the skill set that Melton kind of does, to be able to slide to the outside. So I think Melton's a good call as well. I think someone to watch that is maybe more the third round than the second round is Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon. I think he has the build. He has the length. I don't think he has the speed that you probably want opposite of Juju Brents to make it a perfect fit. But I think he checks a lot of boxes, not all the boxes for the Colts.
Yeah. And then going away from corner and wide receiver, obviously our whole focus really is corner and wide receiver for this team. But at edge rusher, the one player that really stands out to me is Adisa Isaac from Penn State. He's kind of like the poor man's version of Dallas Turner, where you're getting a guy who could stand up off the edge, who's a good pass rusher, good length, good upside, maybe not going to be like this high win rate guy from day one, but you're hoping that you can develop him as the years go along. He can be kind of your go-to pass rusher. So I like him at edge. Ben Sinnott at tight end from Kansas State. I think that's the only other tight end I would take in this class for the Colts besides Brock Bowers. Just because of what he can do. He can line him up in the backfield and be a fullback. You could put him in that sniffer position. You can move him around the formation. You can, do all this motion stuff with him, and he's great after the catch too. So I like Ben Sinnott a lot. And then Brandon Coleman, the offensive lineman from TCU, can play tackle or guard. This might be a little bit of a high projection for him. I've seen anywhere from, third round to fifth round for him, but I think the Colts would value that athleticism, that experience, a guy who's played multiple positions and can kind of come in from day one and be a valuable backup. And look, we know Chris Ballard talked highly about the offensive line depth in this class. There's a lot of offensive linemen they're bound to like. And I think Coleman's going to be one of them when they're really looking to, bolster this interior of the offensive line here going into like day 2, day 3 type stuff. So those are some other guys I had circled there. Do you have other like non-corner wide receiver positions circled as well, Destin?
Yeah, the other position I really like to look back at is safety in the third round specifically. I think there's a lot of really solid options, a lot of guys that would probably line up with what I think they could be interested in doing after the draft with the cap space that they made up for with Buckner's contract. A guy like Jaden Hicks, only 21 years old. I think he would fit that free safety role and can kind of develop a little bit more. A guy that I know I like more than Zach likes is Kalen Bullock. Bullock is turning 21 right after the draft on the 30th. So really young guy, really, really he might be the best coverage safety in this whole draft. Really, really, really bad tackler. Is definitely going to have to figure that out to get much playing time in the NFL. But I think he's a guy that could really fit their defensive style, especially in a coverage system. So it'll be interesting to kind of see where those guys land. And then I have some other fringe guys, but what I will say is I'm pretty out on all the day 2 edge rushers, just because the drop off from day 2 to day 3 edge rushers in this class is not drastic to me. Like I would much rather take some of these high upside, smaller school type guys in this early part of day 3, maybe fringe guys that could be called a day 2. Like if we're going to call like Jalix Hunt out of Houston Christian a day 2 guy, like he's somebody that would intrigue me in the late part of the 3rd.
Yeah, that's definitely a guy we'll save here for our final segment. We're talking about day 3. We're going to the gems here. I'm going to be talking a lot of offensive line. I know we're going to be talking some safeties here. It's going to be a fun one. So we're going to transition to day 3 of the draft with our final segment on today's show in just a second. But first, Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And look, while I'm wallowing in my sadness that the Washington Capitals probably won't win a game in this playoffs, I can go to some Nationals games. It's fine. The Nationals are close to 500. They've got some young talent. CJ Abrams looks like fun. So I think this can be fine. So going to Game Time, I can get in on the Washington Nationals anytime they're playing near me. And again, the prices go down closer to the first pitch. So maybe I'll just wait outside the stadium and just, hope that I can get my Game Time. That's what Game Time is here for. So with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Flash deals, like you guys can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. There's all-in pricing. You can toggle this feature and it shows the total up front, which is a great extra thing that they throw in there. Again, the seat views are the best thing, and the last thing you ever want to do is get stuck sitting behind a stanchion or in some nosebleed seats and you paid for a ticket that you don't want. Game Time takes away that guesswork and gives you that view from your seat. So again, with Game Time, guys, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Destin, we're diving into some day 3 options for the Colts. Now, when we say day 3 options, this could be anything from fringe day 2 guys to almost certainly going to be undrafted free agent guys that the Colts could just draft in like round 6. So this is just a really open segment. We'll see how long we end up going on this one here, Destin. But I think the perfect player to start this segment off with is someone from Chris Ballard's alma mater. I think this center is the perfect guy to talk about. Just a combine freak show, and that is Tanner Bortolini. So, Destin, tell me all about Tanner Bortolini.
Yeah, I mean, I actually got to sit down recently and talk with Tanner one-on-one. As impressive of a guy as he is as an athlete, and that'll come out tomorrow for anybody. Today, I guess, when you guys are watching this episode. So be on the lookout for that. But Tanner Bortolini is a really strong pass protector already. Like from day one, when he goes to the next level, whether you can play him anywhere on the offensive line, and he is going to be a solid pass protector from day one. Played all 5 offensive line positions, played a game in college at tight end. So I think the word versatile isn't enough to describe this guy. I think at the next level, he's going to be an interior guy. You can play him at either guard spot, play him at center. That's what I think stands out to me about the Colts. They have 2 guys on their starting line with Ryan Kelly, with Will Fries, both on their last year of their contract. It's fair to assume that you're probably not extending both guys. Could they do it? Sure. But I think it's safe to assume that they probably move off of one. So with that being the case, you bring a guy like Bortolini in, high upside as a pass protector already. I think he needs a little bit of work in the run game, but I think you bring in a guy like Tony Sperano, who has found a way to get the best out of the guys here. So you let him work with a guy like Bortolini, and I'd be really excited for the upside of this kid. And we'll see if that fit comes, but I would take him in the fourth round. And I've been on record saying if you can get a second, third, and a potential trade back in the first, I wouldn't hesitate to take him with that later third either.
Yeah. Yeah. I've circled pretty much every single like super athlete at center in this class, being like, all right, let's
There's a
just
few.
draft.
And
Yeah,
there's a
just
few.
draft like 1 to 3 of these guys in this draft for me, because they got to be prepared for the future without Ryan Kelly. They really do. I mean, even if you do extend him going into this next free agent cycle, like how many more years do you really have left of him? So you really do need to look at the future replacement there. And Bortolini, a younger player, early declare for the draft, super athlete. He seems to check every box. But I have a lot of other players on here, Destin. I'm going to let you go first here with some of the guys that you have, and then I'll just sprinkle in some of my dudes because I feel like I've written so many articles on every single guy I'm going to talk about here. So I'll play off you here with this final segment.
Hey, I get it. You said you have a lot of offensive linemen, so I'll leave that to you a little bit here. I think one of the ones that I want to talk about is going to include a couple different positions as a whole, but is a need. So I think finding a return specialist in this draft should be a point of emphasis for the Colts. They have guys on the roster that can do it. Like, don't get me wrong. Like Josh Downs can do it. Dallas Flowers has shown an ability to be really good at it. But to me, if you're going to use those guys in solid rotational minutes on the offense, on the defense, like I really think you need to start looking to having key depth players only as returners, especially as important it's going to be with the new rule changes and how often you're actually going to be taking it out of the end zone now. Like there is a reason to do it, and they're going to. So finding guys that can do it at a high level, I think, is important. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably have thought about muting this name because I've said it so much. But Dylan Laub out of New Hampshire is the first one that comes to mind. This is a guy that can do a little bit of everything. He literally did in New Hampshire, lined up at running back, lined up in the slot, lined up at the outside receiver spot at times, led New Hampshire in rushing, led New Hampshire in receiving, and had both return touchdowns for New Hampshire last year. Like this is a kid that can come in and be your returner day one, can come in and compete to be the pass catcher in your running back room day one. There's multiple other running backs to consider there. Blake Watson out of Memphis can also do a little bit of that and is someone to watch for there. Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue. They got to get a closer look at him, obviously, at the local pro day. He's a guy that can catch the ball. He's a guy that can be a returner. One of my favorites in this class at receiver that I think is getting a little undervalued at receiver, but I like him a lot as a returner as well, is Anesis Smith out of Texas A&M. I really like his fit as a backup slot to a Josh Downs in Indy, but I think he's a next level return specialist. So that's another name that I'm watching pretty closely. But I think this class has a ton of high upside return guys on day 3 for them to look at.
Yeah, you know what? You threw Blake Watson in there, and that was another one I was going to try to toss in, at the very end there. But yeah, Blake Watson fits a lot of stuff. Former wide receiver as well. I know Memphis loves former wide receivers at running back. It's like their favorite thing to do. But Blake Watson definitely fits the bill as well. Tyrone Tracy as well. So yeah, a lot of good names there. Anthony Gold from Oregon State too is another guy that I really like there. Luke McCaffrey would be an interesting one too, because even though he never really did return stuff, former quarterback, like Wildcat quarterback, with the ball in his hands a lot. That'd be another interesting one there.
Would you play him in the slot on receiver though?
Probably in the slot. Yeah, that's probably where I'd settle.
A bigger slot.
Yeah, probably settle in the slot, like a Zach Pascal type of slot guy where, we can play some outside, can play some slot, really good backup player. Again, I love the position change stuff. The Colts love that on day 3 guys, and that's something to really watch with him. Another day 3 player I want to throw out real quick that I think, just reading his background, reading about him feels very Colts is Trey Taylor, the safety from Air Force. He was the Jim Thorpe Award winner last year, had a really good pro day. I don't think it was this like, otherworldly pro day, but it was a good one. And then again, another player where it's just you hear the coaches rave about the leadership and about his ability in the locker room and on the field to be like that extra voice out there. And then you saw the production too. Again, the Jim Thorpe Award winner is for the best safety in college football. Like, fantastic player. So I think Trey Taylor is a guy who's kind of been slept on a little bit this draft cycle. And I've seen some comparisons, like a DeMar Hamlin type guy, like a really good specialist who can play some on defense. I think that fits really well for Taylor. I think he can be like a good specialist who can give you some good snaps when he gets out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think another position that has really stood out to me is like the option of adding a coverage linebacker on day
Yeah.
3. There's some solid ones there. Jordan McGee out of Temple is one that comes to mind that can do a little bit of everything. He'd probably be the earlier part of day 3, in my opinion. I know that on the PFF mock draft simulator, he goes in like the 6th and 7th. I don't think that's going to be the case come this weekend. But he's a guy that stands out to me. JD Bertrand out of Notre Dame, multi-year captain, a guy that is really impactful on special teams. It was really impactful on defense, had a really strong week at the Senior Bowl. He checks a lot of boxes for what the Colts usually look for. And then a guy that's just really intriguing as a whole is James Williams out of Miami, guy who converted from safety to linebacker. So he's going to be a bigger linebacker than you typically see. I think he measured in at just over 6'4". So you're going to have him on the inside. I think he is going to be better in coverage at linebacker than he was at safety. And it'll be interesting to kind of see if they look at a guy like that on the day as a day 3 shot. And I'm a big John Trey Hunter fan out of Georgia State. He's a guy that I always try to find a way in one of my mocks at the end. Because I think he's a guy that can do a little bit of everything. Really solid size. Didn't test as well as I was hoping he would, which could take him off the Colts board. But really like his upside as a coverage linebacker. So someone I'm still watching for at the later part of day 3.
Awesome. I'm going to rattle off some names real quick here before we get out. One is defensive lineman Jonah Lualu from Oklahoma. Super athlete. Didn't really get much run there at Oklahoma, but I think the Colts are going to be very high on him. And then I'm going to rip off some offensive linemen that you maybe have not heard of in this draft cycle. Lorenzo Thompson from Rhode Island, the offensive tackle. Tylen Grable from UCF, former quarterback in high school, transitioned to tight end in college, and then eventually settled at left tackle at UCF. Did a really great job there. Jake Kubas over at North Dakota State, really long time starter there. I think the Colts are going to like him quite a bit. And Josiah Ezerim, offensive tackle there at Eastern Kentucky, former defensive tackle, moved out wide. Like, I think he's like 6'8", like 350, massive dude, guy that I have my eye on for the Colts as well. But that's all we have for today, guys. If you like this pre-draft primer, make sure you give us a like there on the show. If you're watching on YouTube, and if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks 2, and at the Destin Adams there on Twitter. Also subscribe to us on YouTube where we list your podcasts. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon with yet another guest.